Hello, and welcome to the Hypno Travelers on the Magical Psyche Highway podcast. That's right. Your host and tour guide is Scott Prevett, a healer, hypnotist, and a magician. And your bus driver is Jason Gobelli, also a hypnotist, an entrepreneur, and a spiritual guide. Disclaimer, neither Jason, Scott, or any of our guests here today are licensed professional psychologists or psychiatrists. So please don't make any changes to any medication or treatments that you are currently on based on the conversation that you hear here today. Just hop on the bus and enjoy the ride. Trip with us on the Inner Revelation bus. That's right.
Hi, welcome back to the Hypno Travelers on the Magical Psyche Highway. I'm Jason, and we are excited today, aren't we, Scott?
Heck yeah. Got a good one for you today.
That's right. We got the great Carla Chalah. Carla, how are you?
Great, thanks. How are you doing?
Oh, we're doing wonderful and we're blessed. Welcome to the show. We're excited to travel down your magical psyche highway. So let's get started. Who are you and what do you do?
So, as you already introduced me, my name is Carla Chalah. I am originally from South Africa, but live in Massachusetts with my little family. I have been a hypnotherapist for a little over 15 years at this point. And I'm also a hypnosis trainer. So I train others and certify others in hypnosis, both through the ICBCH as well as through IACT. And also I'm a trainer for the NGH.
Nice. So Carla, you got a lot going on here. And you're training others in all kinds of different things. You got all the alphabets all together there. So tell me, what is your thing? What is your niche? What's your favorite thing to do?
So I think part of my story is important to tell the story in order, to be able to explain what I do. I originally got into hypnosis because I had experienced some pretty significant trauma as a teenager and had gone through years, as I hear from so many different hypnotherapists and people who get into change work in general. I had gone to a lot of different talk therapists, probably for like over a period of like 6 or 7 years. And even though I fully understood where my trauma came from and how I felt, it really didn't change the way I felt. So cognitively, consciously, I understood what was going on. I knew where the trauma came from, but I still sort of felt stuck. I still felt the same way, which again, we hear this a lot from our clients. We hear this a lot from other hypnotists. And so my undergrad was I got a triple major in English, psychology, and sociology, and had always had a fascination with the mind, more specifically because of the trauma that I had personally experienced and having worked with a number of different therapists. And I logically decided after my undergrad to then go off to grad school. That was actually when I transitioned over to the US. I got my undergrad in South Africa and decided to go to grad school for clinical psychology. And throughout the duration of my schooling and studying clinical psychology, I became increasingly frustrated and disillusioned by the fact that a lot of the approaches I experienced, I was part of a postdoc study working with kids, and I was sort of shocked by how many kids were either on medication or were in therapy for extensive periods of time, even though, they were fairly young. And I started having this feeling there has to be something better. There has to be a different kind of approach that could be taken to more effectively and more efficiently create the change that both I personally was looking for and a lot of people around me were looking for. And I kept, for whatever reason, coming across hypnosis, but coming from such a quote unquote scientific background, I always had this feeling of, oh, well, hypnosis is somewhat woo. Like I was somewhat of a skeptic. I was like, I don't know about this. And anyway, long story short, I became a Harvard dropout and actually flew to California and studied at the Hypnotherapy Training Institute up in Corte Madera, and entered the training somewhat skeptical, if I'm being honest. And within the first 2 weeks of my training, personally experienced more transformation than I had in 6 or 7 years of talk therapy, which again is something that I hear all the time from other practitioners and even, clients and students. And completely fell in love with hypnosis and became so passionate about it that sadly, maybe not so sadly, actually never went back and got my doctorate in clinical psychology and decided to go into hypnosis full time and opened my practice, and initially was really focused on PTSD, anxiety, trauma, a lot of the things which I had personally healed. And I mean, of course, I'm always, progressively in a state of evolution and healing, but I had personally found so incredibly helpful. So I opened my practice, that was back in 2010, and really have been doing it ever since. Have been in full-time practice ever since. And more recently, long-winded response to your question of niches or, things that I tend to focus on. I had gained a significant amount of weight since my kids were born, and having experienced had worked through some of the trauma. But over the past year and a half, I'm proud to say that I really pride myself on walking the walk, not only sort of being somebody who gives advice or tells people what to do or sort of works with things that I don't necessarily have experience with, but I've personally lost 115 pounds.
Wow.
Over the past year and a half, using a lot of the techniques and strategies that I teach to clients and teach to my students. So, long-winded response to your question, but I really pride myself on working with things and with people that I feel passionate about, and that in many cases have had personal experience of working through myself, because, I think many of us learn through doing, and that makes us better practitioners.
Nice. You got a lot going on there, Carla. So let me ask you, I mean, there's so many things that where we can go, but I want to know first, since we're talking about your story, when did you first have that aha moment? Like, wow, I'm going to be able to help people and change lives. How did that come about? What was that like?
I feel like that was, as I said, when I started doing the training, which originally was, if I'm being honest, was to help myself. Like that was more my intention versus actually working with clients. And, I think I had done a demo with one of the instructors, and I felt such a significant shift, such a massive lifting of the stuff that I'd been carrying for years, as I said, since I was a teen, that I just knew in that moment. It's like that, knowing like kind of feeling. I just knew this is what I need to be doing. And like it almost makes me emotional even talking about it, because it just felt so right and so embodied in who I am, that it was almost like I can't possibly do anything else other than this work. And the rest is history. So
Nice. So I get all this. Now you said you've done tons of work before with traditional therapy. So how is this so much different than traditional therapy?
well, I think, as I said before, there's a big difference between cognitively, consciously understanding something or being aware of something. I consider myself a fairly intelligent person. I guess I had to be a Harvard grad student. But one can be consciously aware of something, but still emotionally feel stuck, regardless of understanding, how things started or what the root cause of something might be. And I think personally, and I don't want this to be a therapy bashing session, because, I'm actually an advocate in many instances where therapy can be a great adjunct to the work that we do. But I think therapy is limited in many respects because of this ability to create such significant, profound emotional shifts using hypnosis and when we engage the subconscious mind. Which is also why, like, one of my favorite types of students are when I get psychologists and psychiatrists in my trainings, because I think that that's such an incredible tool that they can then use and introduce to the therapy community at large. And it's just so effective, it's just so efficient that many of them land up using hypnosis more often than traditional therapy, in my experience.
Nice, nice. Now, I've only lost 60. You're 100 and something pounds here. Oh my God, that's wonderful. Let me ask you, what was the shift? What was the rewire? And what do you suggest to our viewers out there, that pick up the fork a little too often?
Well, it's actually really ironic because it was actually in this very office that I'm sitting in right now. I was talking to a colleague, one of the practitioners who actually works, I own a wellness center as well. And the two of us were sitting chatting just as we do, after work or between clients. And I looked at her and I said to her, it's so strange. I'm so good at helping other clients to lose weight. I think I had a client earlier that day who had lost, over 100 pounds. And I said to her, it's so odd that I'm so good at helping others, but I just can't seem to help myself. And as the words came out of my mouth, I was like, what the F, Carla? Of course you can't help yourself, because you have this limiting belief around the fact that you can't help yourself. So maybe we should start there. And it's sort of like the adage of the cobbler's son has good shoes. And here I was, like, sort of literally buried in all of these resources, all of these strategies, all of this awareness and access to things which are somewhat magical, yet I wasn't using them for myself. It was something that I somewhat felt was reserved for my clients and reserved for others. And I finally took control of that. And it really was as simple as that mindset shift, or that sort of, you call that aha moment of, oh my gosh, like, it's like Dorothy in the red shoes. Like, I had this all along, and, one foot in front of the other. Before I knew it, here we are a little over a year and a half later, and I incrementally lost all of this weight. I completely shifted my mindset. I'm now a gym rat, apparently. I go to the gym almost every day. All of these things which had really mentally felt like a block prior to that shift, prior to that moment. And in full transparency, if I don't want people to think, oh, it's magic or it just happens overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. There is also, of course, the commitment of being aware of what you're eating and being open to making those real lifestyle changes. But that being said, I think the greatest shift was the mindset shift in order for those other things to fall into place.
Nice. So that said, and of course it's the mindset shift. That's it with your clients. You do this a lot with the weight loss thing. So let me ask you, what's the biggest mind shift that we need to go through?
Well, I think that's to be honest, I think that's too general of a question to answer, because
the most common is what I meant to say. How about
okay. That? I would say the most common is, I want to be careful of how I answer this, but I would say to recognize and to somewhat determine, and I don't mean consciously determine, but to subconsciously determine how the weight is serving the person, what the secondary gain is that's associated with holding on to that weight. Because I feel like once someone can become aware of that, and I don't mean consciously, cognitively, although sometimes that can be helpful too, but that feeling shift of recognizing I can be different, and I don't need to hold on to this weight for whatever reason, whatever the resource was that the weight was serving. I think that's one of the most powerful things that I see in a lot of weight loss clients. It's actually funny. My client, right before I hopped on this podcast, she's a woman who somewhat heavy set. Like I want to say she's in, she probably was over 300 pounds when I first started working with her. And she's made significant progress. Like I think she's like 60 something pounds down already. And she made a comment today and said something along the lines of, there's one particular family member where, and I quote, she always had to be the bigger person. And I paused her and I said, listen to what you just said. You always had to be the bigger person. And now that you've emotionally started to shift and you've started to do some of the inner work, you no longer need to be the bigger person, physically. Emotionally, you have all the space to fill out without physically having to have that be your body, essentially. And there was this light bulb aha moment that happened. It was a beautiful moment, as all of us practitioners, see in our offices every day, but some are more significant than others. So yeah, I think that to me is one of the most powerful things is recognizing what that underlying driving force is that people hold on to, essentially.
So do you always look for the secondary gain?
No, because I feel like it's not something that one has to look for, because the subconscious mind will reveal it, regardless. And whether it's sort of a aha moment reveal or whether it's an emotional shift that the person experiences, ultimately, I have enough faith and trust to know that it'll be taken care of regardless. It's not something that one has to seek out necessarily.
Nice. Well, now that you know what you know and you can see what you see, you can't not know it anymore. So do you bring this at home with you? Do you ever catch yourself saying, oh, I see what's going on with the kids or whatever?
Absolutely, which is at times it can be a little bit of a curse because, as the mom of an 8 and a 9-year-old, I have a 9-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. It's a tricky thing because, as you said, like, you know what you know and you can't unknow it, but they don't know it yet. So, it's that fine line and balance that I think, anybody who's a parent, and you don't even need to be a parent, you could be a friend, you could be a colleague, where it's important to give people the space to discover things in their own time and on their own timeline. It's not something, sometimes I even feel this way, about my students. Sometimes I wish I could just like download my brain and hand it over to my students and kind of give them the over a decade of experience that I have, because there's an art to hypnosis. And it's not something that can really be taught. It's something that needs to be felt. It's something that needs to be experienced. And I think that's one of those, beautiful things. But as I said, it can also be a curse because it can be a little bit frustrating at times when you see somebody taking certain actions and there's really nothing you can necessarily do about it if that's the choice that they're making.
But can't you use some form of influence, especially when you see the kids on a path that may not serve them well?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I said that I think there's a balance, right? But, I think people need to be in some way open or receptive to it. I think as a parent, you have the added advantage of being an authority figure. But on the flip side of that, you're the parent, so they don't want to listen to you. They want to do the opposite of what you're asking them to do, whether it's hypnotically motivated or influenced or not. I mean, I remember, a year or two ago, I had a girlfriend who I was already sort of on, it must have been about a year ago, I was already on my journey, my health and weight loss journey. And she had said something along the lines of, oh, she would appreciate me helping her and motivating her to lose weight. And it very quickly became apparent to me that actually wasn't what she wanted. When one day we were having a conversation and she said, oh, I'm pulling into this coffee shop and I'm going to get, it was right before her wedding actually, and she said, I'm going to get a blueberry muffin. And I said to her, I'm not sure if that's, the best choice. Like maybe you could, and I gave sort of some alternative, and there was a major pushback of, oh, well, it's fruit, and I'm going to have this blueberry muffin. I was like, okay, have your blueberry muffin. I'm going to shut up.
Nice. So that said, you've got a lot you've learned. I mean, you're teaching and you're doing all this stuff. Who taught you? Who are your mentors? Who do you get guidance from?
Oh my goodness. So many mentors. As I said, I originally studied through the Hypnotherapy Training Institute in California with Randall Churchill and at the time Marlene Mulder. And I feel very fortunate and blessed to have studied with them because they both had very different approaches. One was sort of more methodical, more analytical, and the other one brought a little bit more of the spiritual, sort of more, I don't want to say woo, but like woo side of some of the work that we do. And over the years, I mean, I've been so fortunate to study with so many incredible mentors. Somebody who I really hold in very high regard is Melissa Tiers. Jason Linett, Dan Candell. I mean, there's too many to mention. So many incredible people that I've had the good fortune of working with and learning from and observing, etc.
Nice. Well, you said you hate to say woo, but do you have a little woo in you?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I own a wellness center with a chakra crystal bed, so we'll just leave it at that.
Now, and how much does that play in the part of your sessions? Do you bring a lot of that into you and into your sessions with your people?
Yeah, so it really depends on the client. It's sort of funny because I think for many years I was very shut down to spirituality and sort of the woo component of, I guess we'll just adopt that word for now, of what we do. And I sort of used to pride myself on being very cerebral and very analytical in terms of my approach. And that works for a lot of clients, but with my own journey, as I started to become more open and I started to have more experiences and more wisdom, hopefully, as I got older, there is that balance of exposing people to that and being comfortable with that. And it's definitely a powerful part of a lot of the work that I do and sort of feeling out the client and sort of seeing what they're open to and where they're at on their journey, sort of meeting them where they're at. And with certain clients, I do actually integrate a lot of the wellness center services that I have. So as I mentioned, I have a crystal bed. So for some clients, it can be really powerful working with them on the crystal bed. I do also have two different types of hypnagogic light devices, a Roxiva and an Ajna light, which are really powerful and helpful. In fact, actually, a lot of the time for people that are overly analytical, because it overstimulates them, and I do hypnosis with them under the light. As well as I've actually run groups where I work with groups in front of the light. So, I might have 5 or 6 people in recliners using the strobe light essentially, and I'll do a group on weight loss or anxiety or whatever the topic might be.
Nice. Okay, so let's talk about that because it sounds like you have quite a few accomplishments and quite a few directions you're headed in. What do you consider the accomplishment other than your kids, the one you're most proud of?
I would say that my greatest accomplishment is my own personal growth. And as I said before, walking the walk, because I hate to say it, but I feel like there's so many practitioners out there, and not to be comparative because it's not really about this, but of course, again, perception is reality, so we can only go based on our own reality. But one of the things that I truly pride myself on is always being open to personal growth and always sort of working on my own self-awareness, because very often, like, I'll go to conferences or I'll see other hypnotists that are obesely overweight or are standing outside smoking or are doing the very things that they're working. And I'm not saying you have to be fully healed or, you can't have any vices, because that's unrealistic too. But I think there is something really important about being self-aware enough to recognize how we're being perceived by our clients and by the public, right? I mean, the same way that I wouldn't, feel that comfortable hiring a personal trainer who's obesely overweight, I personally started to feel like a hypocrite. I felt like an imposter sitting in a chair, 100 pounds overweight, and I'm working with a client to lose weight. Like that didn't feel congruent to me. So that I would say is my greatest accomplishment, especially professionally. I mean, also personally, quite honestly, but that's something that I really hold near and dear, and I find very important in doing this work.
Nice. Scott, come on. I'm taking all the questions, brother. Come on, bring it.
So, Carla, let's flip that script a little bit and go into the future 10 years. What do you expect that you have accomplished in those, looking back like that? What do you see that you've done?
Well, that's a great question. First and foremost, as a mom, it's definitely about raising, especially in the climate that we're living in at the moment, and I won't get into that, but raising functional, happy children that are kind. Oh, it's making me emotional. And well-adjusted human beings who are also focused on personal growth and exerting my influence, to the best of my ability to ensure that that happens. From a professional standpoint, I would say that it's continuing on this journey of self-awareness and personal growth and never stagnating. Being aware of just because we check off one accomplishment doesn't mean that it stops there. Like it's an evolution, it's a continuous journey. As well as putting more amazing hypnotists out into the world. That's a personal passion that I have, especially, not to discriminate against other students, but specifically people from the therapy community, because I think there's a huge need for training more therapists, more psychiatrists in this type of approach and this type of work, because from a collective conscious standpoint, if we have better practitioners, better change workers, I think we'll be better off as a society, quite honestly.
Sure. Do you see, you've got such great stories and you've lost all that weight and do you have a book that you're possibly?
I do have a book in the works, which, that's a great point. It's something that's been on the back burner for a long time, and I finally, as of the past few months, have recommitted to that, and that's a project that I'm currently working on. So I'm hoping that that'll be something that'll come out in the next year or two.
You've got a great story of resilience, and so I think that'd be really, really good book to read.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
So, Carla, now let's flip that one more time. So what would you tell your younger self? That one that went through all that trauma, knowing what you know today, what would you tell that one that's gone through all that trauma?
Well, knowing my younger self, she probably wouldn't have listened to anything that I would have to say. So I probably would have had to just learn through the school of hard knocks, like if I'm being completely honest.
That's so true.
I'm sure my parents would attest to that. I mean, I thought my dad was going to have a panic attack when I told him I was dropping out of my Harvard Clinical Psych program to go and study hypnosis. I mean, he literally had I felt like he was ready to disown me. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not really somebody who lives in the past, or, I don't typically look at things from the perspective of what would I have done, or what, would I have said, or, I mean, I know that, society, it's a relevant question to ask, but again, perception is reality. So I didn't have the resources or the awareness back then that I do now. So it really wouldn't have mattered what I had said to myself at that point, because I would have still had, even my worst trauma, and this is something that I say to clients all the time, as much as it sucked and was awful and one of the worst things that ever could have happened to me, on the flip side of that, it was the best thing that ever happened to me and the best thing that ever happened for my clients, because had I not gone through those experiences, I wouldn't be who I am today, and I wouldn't be able to exert the influence, that I'm able to, doing the change work that I do. So it's sort of a catch-22, I feel like.
Well, it sounds to me like you're grateful you dropped out of Harvard.
I am grateful. It was one of the best things that ever happened to me. So
Great, Carla. So here I got another one for you here. How do our viewers get a hold of you?
well, they can get a hold of me. I have a website. Actually, I have two websites. My hypnosis website is www.hemisphere hypnotherapy, like the northern and southern hemisphere, or the two hemispheres of the brain. .com. I also have social media channels, which I have TikTok, I have Instagram, I have Facebook, and they can simply search Hemisphere Hypnotherapy and I will come up.
Nice. Scott, any other questions?
We would really appreciate you coming and spending your time with us. We know you're busy. And just thank you so much for showing up.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you guys inviting me, and this was really a pleasant experience. I always love sharing stories and meeting new amazing practitioners. So it was great to meet both of you. So now I consider you new friends.
That's
Wow,
right.
awesome.
That's right. We love that. Carla, we're not through with you yet, though.
Okay.
because now's the big question.
Okay.
What are your words of wisdom for our viewers?
My words of wisdom are sharing a quote which I consider myself to live my life by. It's a quote that I heard many, many years ago, which has evolved and changed over time as I've evolved and changed over time. And it's an Anaïs Nin quote, and it goes, "Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage." And, courage to me is being willing, to be vulnerable and to embark on a journey, even if you don't know what the destination is, even if you don't know what the end point might be, even if you don't know, what's going to happen between the beginning and the middle and the end of that particular journey. But just having the courage to embark and to get started, to take that first step, is very often what's, the driving force between success and failure. The only difference between somebody who succeeds and somebody who fails is that they tried one more time, or that they were willing to make mistakes and to keep going. That to me is sort of a very powerful quote and a powerful lesson to learn in life.
Wonderful. Well, Carla, that's great. It's been wonderful traveling down your magical psyche highway. We certainly enjoyed the trip.
I even dressed the part today. I wore my psychedelic dress for you.
Oh, I noticed that. I thought that was pretty cool. Pretty hip.
I love it. Yeah, I love it.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
That's awesome.
No, I really appreciate your time. This was wonderful. And I hope to stay in touch to continue to build a relationship with both of you.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Yes, us too. Scott, do you have anything you want to add?
I'm good.
Carla, it's been a pleasure. It's been
Yeah.
great traveling down your highway. We certainly loved having you here. And for our viewers out there, we're glad that you're here too. And if you like us, give us the thumbs up. If you think we're assholes, we don't care. Just give us a thumbs down. Be sure to share with your friends, subscribe to us, and we hope to see you next week. Thanks for coming.
Wow, what a trip. Thanks for taking that journey with us today. Please like us, share us, and enlighten us with your views of the topics we drove into today. We appreciate you and love reading your comments. Thanks again, and we hope to see you back on the bus next week. That's right.